If you visit the grocery store beside your house, almost everything that's sold there is probably made somewhere else outside your country. That yellow banana, fresh meat, milk, you name it. However, that wasn't the case all the time. In fact, it was impossible just 70 years ago, because what happened then changed the course of history. When you think of a great businessman, the first people who come into mind are Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, maybe Rockefeller. Despite their great contributions, this guy had a much greater influence in the entire world. Meet Malcolm McLean. Because his invention literally created globalization. And if it wasn't for him, the world wouldn't be the way we know it today. Because he invented this box. Without this box, you wouldn't have that iPhone or the wide varieties of fruits in the store or even your clothes. IKEA would only be in Sweden, Gucci only in Italy, and iPhones would have to be manufactured in the United States, which would have made them much more expensive than their already $1,000 price tag. Maybe that will make you feel good after throwing another grand on that iPhone. For most of history, shipping goods around the world was expensive, risky, and time-consuming. So only expensive goods were shipped to the elites. International trade was not even an option for most businesses. Before the 1960s, ships would spend as much time in the ports as they would in the sea, because loading and unloading goods from the ship was a huge challenge. Trucks would get the goods to the ship, then people would manually get them to the top of the ship. Just imagine the number of people you need to do that. The shipping cost was at all-time high. On the top of that, goods were often stolen, the ship's capacity was limited, and all that made shipping only more expensive. A cargo ship, the SS Warrior, would carry merchandise from Brooklyn to Bremerhaven in Germany. On that trip, it would only carry a little over 5,000 tons of cargo, from food to household goods, letters to vehicles. Some 2,000 items would be carried separately. The record keeping alone, tracking all those cargoes as they moved around the warehouse, was a nightmare by itself. But the real challenge was physically loading ships. The longshoremen who were responsible for the job would pile barrels of olives and boxes of soap, for example, onto a wooden pallet on the dock. The pallet would be lifted and loaded in the hold of a ship, from where more longshoremen would carry each item into every corner of the vessel, then packing the cargo so it wouldn't shift when they're at the sea. This was far more dangerous work than any other work at that time, including construction. In a large port, someone would be killed every other week. The ship would take 7 to 10 days to load and unload, which equal to the amount of time it would take to cross the Atlantic Ocean. In total, the cargo would cost around $420 a ton to move, adjusted to inflation. And delays were quite typical, since the cargo needed to be distributed by land then. The whole journey might take 3 months. 70 years ago, shipping goods around the world was extremely expensive. But there had to be a better way that's more affordable and faster, right? That's what McLean said when he was waiting for days in his truck to load his goods to the ship. How about we put all the cargo into a big standard box that would fit both in the truck and the ship, and then just move the boxes? That would make things a lot easier. But it wasn't as easy as it sounds, because this idea wasn't new and it had been tried multiple times throughout decades, but didn't catch on. The problem was the ports, shipping, and trucking companies couldn't agree on a universal standard. Some wanted smaller boxes, others bigger or shorter, because every company wanted the box to suit its needs. And then there were the unions who resisted the idea at all cost. It might seem like everyone would welcome such a great innovation since it would make the job easier and safer, but it also meant fewer jobs. However, that didn't stop Malcolm McLean from giving it a shot. He was a trucking entrepreneur and didn't really know much about shipping. But he clearly imagined a steel box for trucks that would easily be loaded on the top of a ship. He spent the next 20 years saving money, planning, and finding ways to make it legally happen. And on April 26, 1956, he finally got the chance to realize his plan. He risked all of his savings, secured a $22 million loan, and purchased SS Ideal X, a World War II oil tanker, and sailed from Newark, New Jersey to Houston, Texas. The containers were unloaded from the ship to the tracks where they were taken to their final destination. That single journey changed the course of history. If hand loading a ship cost around $6 per ton, using containers, it cost only 16 cents a ton to load the ship, 36 times cheaper. That was a revolution. But the biggest change was the time it spent on the port. Loading and unloading were reduced from 10 days to just a few hours, which meant fewer port expenses and more earnings because ships make more money when they're at the sea. Of course, unions were furiously fighting against it, but when Malcolm sold the idea of container ships to the US military, there was no turning point. Everybody knew that this is the future. With the war in Vietnam, it was a nightmare to ship equipment, so they used Malcolm's idea. On the way back, his empty container ships collected cargo from the world's fastest growing economy at that time, Japan. And that was the beginning of the Trans-Pacific trading relationship. You see, when it comes to shipping, there is nothing else that would come even close in terms of cost. It's so cheap that it's even considered almost free. But the world had to agree on a universal standard that would everyone use, and it became the 20-foot-long container. You can fit 48,000 bananas in it, 400 flat-screen TVs, 200 mattresses, 60 refrigerators, 4,000 shoe boxes, or 2 cars. That changed the entire business model of the industry. Ships were no longer in the business of shipping goods, because now they are in the shipping boxes industry. It didn't really matter what these containers had inside. No one really checked them or even cared. They just rely on what the documents say. The challenge was to move boxes from point A to point B as fast and as efficient as possible. That's why we began building bigger ships to the point where the biggest ship today can carry up to 21,413 containers, or 42,826 cars, or 8.5 million flat-screen TVs. It's 400 meters long, 5 times longer than Boeing 747-8. Here's a question for you. How many people do you think manage a ship with 21,000 containers? Believe it or not, 20 or maybe at best 30 people. That's a massive reduction in labor cost. However, not everything is sunshine and rainbows. Even though the US Navy has a big presence almost everywhere and protects the ships from possible attacks, some places are quite vulnerable and ships often face pirates. Sometimes they take control over ships. It's a separate business by itself. If you thought that pirates were a thing of the past, well, I'm sorry to disappoint you. In fact, ship's crew often hire bodyguards to protect them. But here is another question. Why aren't we building even bigger ships? How about a ship that would carry 50,000 containers? Even if it might be engineeringly possible to build one, they will not be able to cross the tiniest canals in the world. The Panama Canal that connects the Americas, Strait of Malacca, which is the most important canal in Asia, and the Suez Canal that connects Asia and Europe. They are the tiniest routes that connect the world. So if the ship won't be able to cross the Panama Canal, for instance, it will have to take a longer route all around South America. If they are longer than 78 meters, they won't fit in the Suez Canal and will have to make it all across the South Atlantic Ocean. If it wasn't for this innovation, you wouldn't have bananas because United States gets its bananas from Guatemala, Ecuador, Costa Rica, Colombia, and Honduras. In 2010, these 5 countries shipped an estimated 3.9 million metric tons of fresh bananas to the United States, accounting for 94% of total US banana imports. With the trade war that's going on between Uncle Sam and China, Apple can shift its production to Taiwan to keep producing iPhones. I can't really say how much it would be more affordable, but not as expensive as if they would be manufactured here in the United States. And that's all thanks to this little box that was invented 70 years ago by Malcolm McLean. And now it's your turn. First, give this video a thumbs up and let me know, what do you think is going to be the next innovation that's going to have as much influence in the world as this steel box had? Thanks for watching, and until next time.